Ma'am, you're listed as unsafe. That one sentence, short, sharp, delivered in a quiet school hallway at 3:12 p.m., cut through me more cleanly than anything my daughter-in-law had ever said to my face. The principal didn't raise her voice. He didn't need to. Her words carried the weight of a decision already made, and for a moment I stood completely still, as if the tile floor beneath my feet had turned to ice. Before you watch another second, take a breath, because what happened to me at that school changed everything. If you've ever been quietly pushed aside or misunderstood, this story will speak straight to your heart. Stay with me. You don't want to miss what happens next. I didn't gasp. I didn't argue. At my age, you learn the power of holding your breath before you speak. So I simply placed my purse down on the desk, folded my hands gently, and said, "I'd like to see the form." My voice came out steady. Steadier than my heart, which felt like it was knocking on every rib. The principal blinked, almost surprised I wasn't reacting the way she expected. Shocked, defensive, loud. She took a small step back, cleared her throat, and opened a red folder from the stack she kept beside her computer. The sound of the metal rings clicking open echoed down the empty hallway, bouncing off the lockers like a warning. When she pulled out the form, I recognized the handwriting before I even recognized my own name. Perfect loops, wide spacing, that little inward curl she made whenever she wrote the letter F. My daughter-in-law's signature was always too pretty for the truth. The principal slid the page toward me with 2 fingers, as if it carried something contagious. "This was submitted yesterday," she said. Yesterday. I had given her dinner the night before. I'd made a pot of soup for my grandson, and she had thanked me with a polite smile. Not warm, never warm, but polite enough to pass for kindness in front of my son. All the while she was preparing this, I lowered myself into the chair, the vinyl cushion sighing underneath me. The hallway clock ticked loudly, its second hand jerking forward in quick, accusing movements. And then I read the first line. Guardian is not permitted to pick up child due to safety concerns. Safety concerns. Me. I felt something inside me tighten, but my face didn't move. At 68 years old, I've learned to keep still when the world tries to shake me. I let my eyes travel down the page slowly, absorbing each word like a cold wind against my skin. She demonstrates unstable behavior. She disregards boundaries. She becomes emotional without cause. She has difficulty understanding what is safe for a child. Each line was written with the confidence of someone who expected to win. I pressed my thumb gently against the paper, feeling the slight indentations from her pen. She had written this with intention, not haste. She wanted this to last. The principal shifted her weight, uncertain. "If you have concerns," she began softly, "we can schedule a meeting with the district." I lifted my hand, stopping her with a gesture gentle enough to seem respectful but firm enough to show I wasn't collapsing. "No need," I said. "Not today." I folded the form carefully, corner to corner, like it was something delicate instead of something cruel. Then looking up, I asked, "May I have a copy?" Another flicker of surprise in her eyes. Maybe she expected tears. Protest. Outrage. But she didn't know me. And neither, apparently, did my daughter-in-law. The principal nodded and walked toward the copier, her shoes clicking across the floor. While she made the copy, I looked around at the school. Colorful artwork taped to the walls, backpacks hanging on hooks, a faint smell of tempera paint drifting from an open classroom door. It felt strange standing there in a place meant for children and sunlight, holding a paper filled with accusations designed to dim both. When she returned and handed me the copy, I thanked her. Truly thanked her. Her eyebrows twitched again. I tucked the paper into my purse, right beside a folder I always carried at the bottom. Not a large one, not suspicious, but thick enough to hold what I'd been collecting quietly for months. She didn't know that, and neither did my daughter-in-law. But one day they would. Outside, the November air brushed against my face, cool and steady, like it was reminding me to breathe. New York always smelled different in late afternoon. Damp sidewalks, warm pretzels from a nearby vendor, a faint hint of exhaust from the buses lining up for the after-school rush. The wind tugged at my scarf, and I wrapped it tighter around my neck as I stepped toward the bus stop. Other parents hurried past me, chatting, greeting their children, unaware of the storm quietly forming in my purse. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. I climbed aboard slowly, taking the seat by the window. The city streaked by in shades of gray and gold as the sun began to lower, catching on the rooftops and turning the windows into tiny mirrors. I unfolded the form again, smoothing it on my lap. One word stood out this time. Unstable. I tilted my head, remembering the first time she used that word around me. Jokingly in the kitchen after I misplaced a bottle of spices. "You're getting unstable, Mom," she had laughed, glancing at my son for approval. He didn't laugh back, but he didn't correct her either. It was small then. A seed. I didn't notice it growing. But now, reading the same word printed boldly on a school document, I saw the pattern clearly. She had been planting this narrative for months. The bus turned sharply and the form slid across my lap. I steadied it with my hand as a thought settled heavily in my mind. She expected me to react the same way I always did. Softly, quietly, without resistance. She miscalculated. Outside the window, a group of children ran past a bakery window, their laughter muffled by the glass. One of them had my grandson's same blue jacket, the one I had bought him last Christmas. I thought about how his little face would light up when he saw me waiting at the gate, how he would call out, "Grandma," and run straight into my arms. The idea that she was trying to take that from me felt like someone had pressed hard fingers against my chest. When I reached my stop, I stepped off the bus and walked the 3 blocks to my apartment. My building wasn't fancy, but it was home. The hallway light flickered as I pushed my door open, and a warm, familiar scent, lavender and old wood, wrapped around me. I set my purse on the kitchen table and reached for the kettle. Making tea felt like something steady, grounding. I needed steady. I needed grounded. I poured water into my favorite mug, the one with a tiny chip on the rim, and let the steam rise into my face. The tea warmed my hands, but the cold inside me didn't thaw. I pulled out the form and placed it beside the folder I had tucked away for so long. The 2 papers, the accusation and the evidence, sat side by side like 2 halves of a story not yet told. At 3:47 p.m. my phone buzzed. My son. "Mom, everything all right? You sounded off earlier." I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the screen. I typed 4 words. "Can you come over?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Reappeared. Of course. "Be there in 20. I exhaled, the breath long and shaky. My hand brushed the surface of the evidence folder, feeling the faint ridges of each page inside. I imagined the moment he would see it, how confusion would turn to recognition, how the pieces he'd been ignoring would finally align. But I didn't let myself drift too far ahead. 1 step at a time. While waiting for him, I straightened the kitchen, wiping the table, adjusting the chairs, clearing a few papers that had gathered by the window. Small distractions to keep my mind from circling the same question. Why no? What pushed her to file this form? At 4:12 p.m. footsteps approached. My son's knock, gentle not hurried, echoed through the apartment. I opened the door slowly. He stood there, concern etched across his face. "Mom, what's going on?" I stepped aside, letting him in. The form lay on the table, folded once, sharp and deliberate. He moved toward it. He picked it up. He unfolded it. As his eyes skimmed the first lines, his brows pulled together. Confusion. Then disbelief. Then something else. "Mom, what is this?" he asked, voice tight. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't, not yet. Because behind him, rising in the hallway like a shadow I'd been expecting, came the sharp click of familiar footsteps. Confident. Determined. Uninvited. My daughter-in-law stepped into view, her smile thin and cold. "Good," she said softly. "You already showed him." The conflict had finally arrived at my table. And the next words spoken would change everything. But not in this chapter. I lifted my chin. She took 1 step forward. And the room fell silent. She took 1 step forward, the room falling silent around us, and for a moment neither of us moved. My son stood between us, his hand still gripping the form, his eyes darting back and forth as if he were trying to read our faces before choosing what to believe. The air felt thick, almost heavy enough to taste like the pressure before a storm. I straightened my posture, keeping my hands loosely folded in front of me. He looked confident, too confident. The kind of confidence that doesn't come from truth but from someone who's been rehearsing their version for so long that they think it's unbreakable. "I didn't expect you to run here so quickly," she said to my son, her tone light and soft, as if she had walked into a casual conversation instead of a confrontation. "But since we're all here, it's better we clear this up." Clear this up. As though the lies she wrote could be wiped away like dust. My son turned toward her, the confusion still thick in his expression. "Why would you write something like this?" he asked, holding the form up slightly. His voice trembled, not with anger, but with a kind of fear I hadn't heard in him before. She sighed, long and patient, like she was explaining something to a child. "Because I care about our son's safety. I did what I thought was necessary." Her eyes flicked toward me, sharp and assessing. I saw it then, the tiny spark of victory she believed she already had. She thought the form had done its job. She thought this moment was the final push to remove me from their lives. But what she didn't know was that the form wasn't the beginning of her victory. It was the beginning of her unraveling. My son rubbed his forehead. "Mom has never been unsafe," he murmured almost to himself. "Why would you write that? Why now?" She stepped closer to him and placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You've seen how she gets," she whispered. "You know how emotional she becomes. I wasn't trying to hurt her, I was trying to protect our family." Her voice softened, almost trembling, the kind of trembling meant to trigger sympathy. For a split second I watched my son hesitate. Then I spoke. "You can protect your family without lying about me." Her head snapped toward me, surprise flashing across her face for just a moment. She wasn't used to me speaking with this level of steadiness. For years I had tried to keep peace, to smooth over arguments, to stay small so my son's marriage wouldn't strain. But today the weight of her words had strengthened something inside me. She recovered quickly, narrowing her eyes. "I didn't lie," she said, every syllable crisp. I didn't respond. Sometimes silence is the loudest truth. My son swallowed hard. "Mom," he said carefully, "you said you wanted to talk. Is there something I need to know?" I nodded and reached for the small folder tucked beside the form. Not the larger one with the deeper layers of evidence. Just enough to show him the direction things were heading. Enough to break the illusion she had been building. His wife's expression tightened when she saw the folder. "What is that?" she demanded. "Something you forgot I have," I replied, my voice quiet. My son stepped closer as I opened the folder. I placed 3 documents on the table. Nothing dramatic, nothing overwhelming. Just 3 pieces of paper that held more truth than any form she had submitted. First, a printed message where she told a friend she was exhausted from managing him and his mother, and how she needed more space. Second, a screenshot of her complaining to a neighbor about how I invited myself over too often, even though she had been the one asking me to help with childcare. And third, a note from a neighbor, politely written, mentioning she heard raised voices between them late at night. Her voice sharp and angry, not mine. My son stared at the papers, his expression shifting in slow, painful degrees. Confusion. Recognition. Doubt. She stepped forward quickly, snatching the first paper from his hand. "These are taken out of context," she said sharply. "You can't just—" "There's no context needed," I interrupted. "Your own words speak for themselves." Her jaw clenched. A faint flush crept up her neck. My son looked from her to me, then back at the papers. "Why didn't either of you tell me any of this?" he asked, helplessness spreading across his features. She answered first. "Because I didn't want to involve you in every little thing," she said. "I was handling it." Handling it. That was one word for what she was doing. He turned to me next. "Mom." I took a deep breath. "I didn't tell you because I didn't want to make things harder for you," I said honestly. "I saw you pulling away. I thought if I brought up any of this, it might push you further from me." My son's shoulders slumped a little, guilt flickering in his eyes. Before he could respond, she spoke again, her tone sharper now. "She's manipulating you," she said, pointing at me. "She's turning this into something big because she can't handle boundaries." There was the shift. The mask cracking. I watched her closely, noticing the patterns. When she felt secure, her voice softened. When she felt threatened, it hardened. Today it flickered between both, revealing the edges she kept hidden. My son stepped back, creating a small space between them. His silence was louder than either of our voices. I decided to continue, not with accusations but with clarity. "I never asked for anything more than a relationship with my grandson," I said. "But the form you filed wasn't about boundaries. It was about control." Her eyes widened. "Control? You're the one." I lifted a hand, stopping her. "I'm not finished." She fell silent, though her chest rose and fell with quick breaths. I've watched you, I said softly. Not the way you think behind your back or with suspicion. But I've watched the way you speak to him when you're frustrated. The way you rewrite situations to make yourself look like the victim. The way you plant words in conversations so they take root days later. Her face paled. My son's eyes slowly turned toward her. What is she talking about? He asked, his voice strained. She forced a laugh, too loud for the small kitchen. Oh, come on, you can't honestly believe. But he wasn't laughing. He looked tired. Defeated. Unsure of his footing for the first time in years. I saw a shadow cross her expression then, not fear but calculation. She was trying to decide whether to continue pushing her narrative or switch tactics. She chose the wrong one. This is ridiculous, she said, throwing her hands up. She's twisting everything. He always does this. She gets emotional and dramatic and then you feel obligated to take her side. My son flinched slightly at her wording. That reaction alone was a crack widening. Before he could speak, a small knock sounded at the door. We all turned. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Hart, an elderly woman from down the hall. She peeked in gently, noticing the tension. I'm sorry, she murmured. I heard raised voices and wanted to make sure everything was all right. Her timing was unplanned, but her presence changed the air instantly. She looked between my son, his wife, and the papers on the table. Her eyes, kind but perceptive, landed on the note she had written for me weeks ago. Oh, she said softly. Is this about what I wrote? My daughter-in-law stiffened. My son looked at her again, something in his expression shifting. Mrs. Hart stepped inside just enough to continue. I never meant to cause trouble, she said kindly. I just wanted to be honest about what I heard. I thought your son should know there were arguments, especially since she claimed they were about his mother. Silence fell so thick I could hear the refrigerator humming behind me. My daughter-in-law's lips parted but no words came out. My son looked at her, really looked this time. And in that quiet moment, I saw something begin to change in his eyes. Not a conclusion, not yet. But doubt. Real doubt. The kind that grows. She reached for him again, but he stepped back this time, not angrily but instinctively, like he needed space to think. His breathing deepened. His hands tightened around the edge of the table. Mom, he murmured, I didn't know any of this. I held his gaze steady. There's more you need to understand, I said softly. But not all at once. Today is just the beginning. His wife turned toward me, her face paling at the phrasing. Beginning. It was the first time she realized she wasn't dealing with the version of me she thought she could silence. My son slowly folded the form and set it back on the table. He didn't look at her when he said, I need a moment. He stepped toward the living room. She followed him. Wait, no, don't walk away. We need to talk. But he kept walking. I remained where I was, my hand resting lightly on the folder. The walls of my apartment felt different now, not small, not quiet, but strong. Like they had finally heard the truth spoken aloud. And as her voice trailed after him, trembling with frustration, I realized something. I hadn't uncovered everything yet. Not even close. But today, for the first time, I saw just how deep her lies truly went. And I knew I had only scratched the surface. And before I could breathe through that realization, she turned toward me with a sudden sharpness in her eyes, the kind that warned me she wasn't done fighting. Her posture straightened, her chin lifted, and for a moment she looked less like the woman who married my son and more like someone preparing for a battle she believed she'd already won. You're blowing everything out of proportion, she said, her voice clipped but low enough to pretend she was calm. You always do this. You twist things. You make them bigger than they are. I didn't answer immediately. My fingers rested on the folder, feeling the slight texture of the paper through the cover. In the living room, I could hear my son pacing. His footsteps uneven, softer each time he reached the far wall. It sounded like a man trying to pull himself together and failing. She noticed the direction of my gaze and took a step closer to me, lowering her voice further. He doesn't need this right now, she murmured sharply. He's stressed enough. He doesn't need you feeding him doubts. Feeding him doubts. Interesting phrasing, considering the months she had spent sowing them herself. I kept my expression steady and said quietly, he deserves the truth. That sentence, calm, simple, landed harder than any accusation could have. Her eyes tightened, and for the first time I saw panic flicker beneath her confidence, quick and uninvited. She masked it almost instantly, but it had been there. I had seen it. She leaned in slightly. If you push him, she whispered, you're going to push him away. Is that what you want? Her tone wasn't emotional, it was strategic. I straightened my back, letting her see that I wasn't bending. If the truth pushes him away, I said, then it means he wasn't standing on solid ground in the first place. Her lips parted, and for a moment she looked truly stunned. She wasn't used to pushback, not from me. She had built an entire structure around the assumption that I would always stay quiet. Before she could answer, the front door creaked slightly as the building's hallway draft pushed against it. The sound pulled both of our attention. It reminded me that we weren't alone, not really. Every word spoken in this apartment today would ripple outward in ways she couldn't control. She crossed her arms, her fingers pressing firmly against her skin. I'm not going to let you turn him against me, she said, her voice steadier now. I have worked too hard to keep this family together. The irony almost made me laugh. She wasn't trying to hold anything together. She was trying to hold everyone in place. I stood slowly, my knees stiff from sitting too long, and met her gaze directly. If your place with him is strong, I said, why are you so afraid? Her mouth tightened. She opened it, closed it, then opened it again, like she was sorting through all the versions of the truth she had practiced and couldn't decide which one fit this moment. Finally she settled on indignation. You think you know everything, she snapped. But you only see what you want to see. I let her speak. Part of me wanted to hear how she justified her actions, even to herself. You don't know what it's like raising a child, running a home, dealing with stress, she continued, each word sharper. You just show up when it suits you. You act like you're this perfect grandmother, but you've made things harder for us. You think you're helping, but you're not. I absorbed her words without flinching. At my age, I've learned not to crumble beneath accusations built on insecurity rather than truth. She glanced toward the living room again, lowering her tone. He's overwhelmed enough. He doesn't need you dragging him into drama. Then why did you create the drama? I asked softly. Her head jerked up, her eyes flashing with irritation. I didn't create anything. You filed a form behind his back, I said. Behind mine too. She took a step toward me, jabbing a finger in the air, not at me but close enough to feel the heat of her frustration. I filed that form, she hissed, because you make things unpredictable. I raised an eyebrow. In what way? She faltered. Just for a second. You get emotional. You interfere. You say things that confuse him. You make him question himself. It was almost remarkable hearing her describe her own behavior and trying to place it on me. Projection wasn't new, but hearing it spoken aloud was a different kind of clarity. Your son needs stability, she continued, straightening her shoulders. I'm the one who gives him that. Not you. Her certainty was so inflated it had nowhere to go but downward. In the living room, my son paused his pacing. I could sense his presence hovering just beyond the doorway, listening, absorbing, trying to piece us together. I softened my voice. I'm not taking him from you. I'm not trying to replace you or cause division. I just want the truth acknowledged. She laughed. A short, humorless sound. You act like the truth is some weapon you've been holding on to. You don't have anything. My fingers tapped the surface of the folder again. She followed the motion. Her face shifted, barely but enough. She did fear something. She just didn't know how much she should fear yet. I spoke gently, so gently she had to lean in to hear me. You assume you're the only one who's been watching. Her jaw tightened. What does that mean? It means, I said, that I pay attention too. She blinked. Once, twice. I could see the calculations in her eyes shifting. She was trying to determine whether I was bluffing. She was used to being the one collecting, interpreting, manipulating. The notion that someone else, someone she underestimated, might be doing the same unnerved her. Before she could respond, my son appeared in the doorway, his face pale but composed. What are you two doing? He asked softly. I needed a moment, but I can hear you from the living room. She turned instantly, her voice switching to gentleness. Honey, we're just talking. We're not just talking, he interrupted. His voice was calm but firm, a tone I hadn't heard from him in years. I'm trying to understand what's happening. She stepped toward him. Then let me explain. No, he said, raising a hand. I want to hear both sides. Not a performance. Her mouth snapped shut. The word performance hit her harder than anything I could have said. A new tension filled the room, one that wrapped around all three of us, thickening the air. My son sat at the table, the form lying open in front of him like a small but undeniable fracture between what he believed and what he now feared was true. He rubbed the back of his neck, a gesture he'd had since he was a child whenever something overwhelmed him. "Start from the beginning," he said quietly. She rushed to speak first. "She's twisting things." He held up a hand again. "I said both of you. Not just you." Her cheeks flushed. Not from embarrassment, she didn't do embarrassment, but from losing control of the narrative. I waited a moment, allowing the silence to settle. Then I spoke slowly, carefully, choosing each word with intention. "I didn't want this," I began. "I didn't want conflict. I didn't want tension. I certainly didn't want to see you caught in the middle." My son's eyes softened a little. That the words barely left my own mouth before a deeper stillness fell over the room. My daughter-in-law's warning hung in the air like dust after a long-shut door has been forced open. She stared at me with a confidence that wasn't natural. It was borrowed from fear she was trying to hide. My son stood frozen between us, the tension in his shoulders tightening inch by inch. His breathing was slow, measured, like he was trying to control the panic building inside him. I could see confusion forming behind his eyes, the kind that unsettles a person completely. She took another step toward the table, her gaze never leaving mine. "You're not the only one who's been collecting evidence," she said, her tone colder now, more calculated. I didn't move. "Evidence of what?" I asked softly. She didn't answer. She just smiled, a thin, evasive curve of her lips, and turned away, reaching for her purse on the counter. When she opened it, I noticed her hands trembling slightly. She wanted to appear confident. But confidence and control aren't the same thing. She pulled out her phone and held it up as though it were a shield. "You want honesty? Here," she said. "Let's talk honestly." My son closed the distance between them in 2 steps. "What's on your phone?" he asked, his voice steady but strained. She kept the screen turned away from us. "Messages. Notes. Things your mother said that concern me. Things she did." I shook my head slowly. "Show him." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "I don't have to prove anything," she said quickly. Too quickly. My son didn't raise his voice, but his tone dropped low, the way it used to when he wanted answers no one wanted to give. "Show me," he repeated. Something inside her cracked, not loudly, not visibly, but enough for her mask to slip. She scrambled for a retort, but none came. Instead, she locked the phone and shoved it back into her purse. "I'm not doing this," she said. "Not today." Her refusal told me more than any screenshot could have. She pushed past my son and headed for the door. "I need air," she muttered. "I'll be back later." The door closed harder than she intended. The frame quivered for a moment afterward. And then the apartment fell into a strange silence. Thick, breathless, uncertain. My son ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "Mom," he whispered, "what is happening? Why is she acting like this?" I watched him carefully. He wasn't ready for the full truth, not yet. But he was ready for more than he had. "Sit," I said softly. We sat across from each other at the small kitchen table. The form lay between us like an open wound. I could hear the hallway outside, distant footsteps, a door shutting, the hum of an elevator descending. Life moved normally around us, even as ours shifted quietly. "I didn't collect anything to hurt her," I began. "I collected things to understand what was happening to us. To you." He looked down, ashamed. "I've been different," he admitted. "You're right. I've been pulling away." "I know," I said. "And I know why." He swallowed hard. His eyes grew glossy, but he blinked the tears away. "I should have seen it sooner." "You couldn't," I said gently. "Because she didn't want you to." He lowered his gaze again, defeated. I reached across the table and rested my hand on his. For the first time in a long time, he didn't pull away. I could feel how badly he needed clarity. So I gave him some. "There's more," I said quietly. His eyes lifted, hesitant but ready. "You saw a piece of her pattern today," I continued. "But it's been building for months. Maybe longer." He leaned back, absorbing my words like slow-falling rain. "What kind of pattern?" I didn't want to overwhelm him. I had to reveal things in small, digestible parts. I started noticing things that didn't make sense, I said. Little contradictions. Things she said about me that didn't match what actually happened. He frowned. Like what? I took a breath. Remember when she told you I canceled on babysitting last minute because I wasn't feeling stable? He nodded slowly. I remember. I never canceled, I said. She told me you had changed your plans and didn't need me. He blinked. Mom, are you sure? Yes, I said. I wasn't sick. I wasn't unstable. I was ready to watch my grandson. He rubbed his forehead again. Why would she lie about something like that? To create distance, I said. One small step at a time. He lowered his hand and looked at me differently now, searching my face for any sign of untruth. He didn't find any. That's not all, I added gently. He exhaled sharply. There's more. I nodded. I reached out to people quietly. Not to start trouble. Just to understand. His shoulders tensed. Who? Her previous landlord, I said. A teacher she clashed with. Women she used to work with. He froze. Why would she clash with a teacher? Patterns, I replied simply. Repeated behaviors. The same kinds of accusations she's made about me, she made about others before. Not the same words but the same intent. His eyes widened a fraction. She isolated people, I continued. She blamed them. She rewrote stories so she looked like the reasonable one. His breathing stopped for a moment. I watched him take it all in piece by piece. She told me they were difficult people, he whispered almost to himself. I know, I said. And that's what frightened me. Because when I compared what she told you with what they described, the stories didn't match. He leaned forward. What did they say? I hesitated, not because I didn't know how to answer but because I wanted to protect him from the sharpest edges. They said she was demanding, I explained. Quick to anger. Easily threatened. And they said she was persuasive. He closed his eyes slowly as if the word hit too close to home. I gave him a moment. When he opened his eyes again, the confusion was still there, but something else had joined it. A dawning clarity. Mom, he said softly, I didn't know any of this. I know, I whispered. And I didn't expect you to. That's why I started looking deeper. I stood and walked to the small drawer near the window. I pulled out a thin envelope, one I hadn't shown him yet. Inside it were a few handwritten notes from neighbors and a printed conversation I'd been forwarded anonymously. He watched me closely as I returned to the table and set the envelope down beside the form. What's in there? He asked. Things I didn't want to believe at first, I said. He opened the envelope carefully, sliding out the contents. A note from a neighbor describing raised voices. A message from a former coworker mentioning she left abruptly after a conflict she caused but blamed on someone else. A short, typed summary from her old landlord describing consistent tension. My son read each one slowly, his expression collapsing and rebuilding with every line. She never told me any of this, he whispered. I know. She made it sound like everyone mistreated her. I know. He set the papers down with trembling hands. Mom, how did I miss all of this? Because love makes us blind in small, gentle ways, I said. And because she worked hard to keep it that way. He sat very still. I could see the weight settling on him. What do I do? He asked finally. You don't have to decide anything today, I said softly. But you do need to see clearly. That's all. Before he could respond, there was a sharp knock at the door. We both looked up, startled. He stood slowly and walked to the door. When he opened it, he froze. Standing there was a woman I didn't recognize. Mid-40s, neatly dressed, holding a manila folder to her chest. Is this the residence of? She said my daughter-in-law's full name. My son nodded numbly. Yes. Can I help you? She glanced past him, then at the folder in her hands. I was told she lives here. I need to speak with her. It's regarding an unresolved matter from her previous rental. My breath caught. My son's eyes widened. And the woman's tone held no malice, only business. I'm sorry, he said faintly. She's not here right now. The woman nodded politely. Please ask her to contact me, she said, handing him a card. It's important. When the door closed behind her, my son stared at the card for a long moment. Unresolved matter? He whispered. What does that mean? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know yet. But I did know one thing. This wasn't coincidence. He placed the card on the table, and for the first time a new expression crossed his face. One that wasn't confusion or fear. Determination. What else don't I know? He whispered. I looked at him gently. Enough, I said, that we need to keep going. And for the first time he nodded without questioning me. We had crossed a line today, not of anger, not of revenge, but of recognition. The truth wasn't a wound anymore. It was a path. When he whispered, enough that we need to keep going, I saw something in my son's eyes I hadn't seen in years. Clarity. Real clarity. Not the kind forced into place by someone else's version of the truth. His shoulders straightened as though the weight he'd been carrying finally shifted from confusion to resolve. Before I could answer, the doorknob rattled. Not a knock. Not hesitation. A full turn of metal. Someone trying to come in. My son stiffened. I felt my heartbeat steady, not race. All the scattered pieces that had lived in the shadows for months began sliding together into one final, unbroken line. The door swung open and she stepped inside. Her eyes darted instantly to the folder on the table, then to the business card lying beside it. Something flickered across her face. Fear, recognition, then something sharper. You had someone here? She demanded, shutting the door harder than she meant to. My son held up the card. Someone came looking for you. She snatched it from him, eyes scanning the name. Her jaw tightened as she crumpled the card in her fist. She had no right to come here, she said. Whatever she told you, it's exaggerated. She's been pestering me for months. My son didn't respond, and that silence unnerved her more than any accusation could. I stayed seated, hands folded calmly, watching her pace, back and forth, the rhythm of someone losing control but trying to pretend she hadn't noticed. Why didn't you tell me this was happening? My son asked. Her head whipped toward him. Because it didn't matter. It mattered enough for her to show up at my mother's door, he said. Her nostrils flared and a brittle laugh escaped her. She's dramatic. You know how people exaggerate. And your mother. My son raised a hand, not harshly but firmly. No, he said. We're not doing that anymore. She froze. And everything inside the room shifted. She looked at him the way someone looks at a chair they pulled only to discover its legs were broken. Couldn't. Pause. Agree. What else don't I know? He asked again, quieter now, almost resigned. His voice trembled, not from fear but from realization. She swallowed, her throat tightening. Are you really going to take her side over mine? My son didn't look at me. He didn't look at her. He stared at the table, the papers scattered like pieces of a truth he had tried to ignore for too long. I want the truth, he said. Not sides. Her chest rose and fell quickly. She paced again, rising agitation tightening her steps. She's turning you against me, she said. That's what this is. She's wanted this for years. I quietly shook my head. I didn't want this, I said softly. But I won't accept being erased. She spun toward me. No one erased you. You filed paperwork saying I was unsafe, I reminded her gently. Her lips parted but no words came. For the first time she couldn't twist the narrative fast enough to protect herself. My son turned toward her, his voice low. Why did you write that? Why accuse my mother of something she never did? The air tightened. And then she snapped. Because you were slipping away, she burst out. Every time she came around you weren't paying attention to me. You'd light up when she walked in the room. You'd listen to her more than you listened to me. You stopped seeing me. Her words flooded fast as though years of hidden resentment had finally broken through the cracks. I was the one holding everything together, she continued, stepping closer to him. I handled the school, the house, the bills, our son's needs, everything. And every time she showed up, I felt like an outsider in my own home. My son's face paled. So you punished her? No, she said quickly. I protected my place. By lying, he asked. She hesitated. That small, sharp silence revealed everything. I watched the truth sink into him slowly, painfully. A mother can feel when her child's heart breaks, even when he tries to hide it. He stepped back, shaking his head. You made me doubt her for months. You made me question myself. Why? Because I was afraid, she cried. Because I thought you'd choose her over me. Because every time she showed up, I watched you drift. Her voice cracked. Her chest heaved with uncontrolled frustration. I'm tired of being the villain in your story. I've been doing everything. And I won't apologize for trying to protect my family. She looked at me when she said family, like I was the intruder. My son inhaled slowly. Trying to protect us is one thing, he said. Changing the truth is another. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for something she could grab. An excuse, a reason, a crack in his resolve. She found nothing. Then her gaze fell on the folder. What's even in there? She demanded. More stories? More things twisted to make me look bad. I didn't speak. Instead, I gently pushed the folder toward the center of the table. He stared at it like it was a living thing, breathing, waiting, watching. My son opened it. Her expression changed instantly. Don't. But he was already reading. The landlord's note. The coworker's message. The neighbor's statement. The contradictions. The pattern. Each page widened the distance between them. She reached for the papers, but my son held them away. Stop, he said firmly. His tone startled her. She lowered her hand slowly, her chest rising and falling too fast, her composure unraveling. This is all lies, she whispered. No, he said. It's the truth you didn't tell me. Her face twisted, not in sadness but in panic. You're letting her ruin us. If we were strong, he said, she couldn't. The room was silent. Utterly silent. I watched her crumble, not gracefully, not quietly, but in a frantic inner collapse she fought to hide. She stepped back from him. I did everything for you, she whispered. Everything. You hid everything from me, he replied. There was the truth positioned between them like a boundary that could never be crossed again. She turned toward me with a look I couldn't name, anger, fear, desperation. You did this, she said. You broke us. No, I said gently. I stopped you from breaking me. Her shoulders shook, whether from rage or disbelief I couldn't tell. My son closed the folder and set it down carefully. I need space, he said quietly. Real space. Not the kind you forced me into. Tears sprang to her eyes, not soft, not sorrowful, but sharp with wounded pride. You can't be serious, she whispered. You're choosing her over me? I'm choosing the truth, he said. She opened her mouth, but he turned away. Just turned away. And that was the moment she realized the fight was no longer hers to control. She collected her purse with trembling hands, staring at the floor instead of either of us. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She didn't threaten. She simply walked out. The door closed softly behind her. And the silence that followed was unlike any silence I'd ever known. Not heavy, not painful, but clean. My son sank into the chair, burying his face in his hands. I moved slowly to his side, resting my palm on his back. It's all right, I whispered. No, he said, voice cracking. It's not. But it will be. We sat there a long while. Not speaking. Not analyzing. Just breathing in a room finally free of twisting narratives. After a few minutes he lifted his head. Mom, how did you stay quiet this long? I smiled softly. Because I wanted peace more than victory. And now, he asked. Now, I said, I want clarity. He nodded slowly, wiping his eyes. For the first time in a long time he looked like the boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, seeking comfort, not instruction. Thank you, he whispered. For not giving up. I almost did, I admitted. But then I remembered who I am. We rose together, and when he hugged me, his embrace was deeper than apology. It was recognition. A connection restored. A truth reclaimed. As he stepped toward the hallway to gather himself, I walked to the window. The late afternoon sun fell across my hands, warming them gently. I closed my eyes. The world outside was the same. But inside me something had shifted permanently. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't fought. I hadn't lashed out. I had simply opened the door to the truth. And watched the lies fall apart under their own weight. This wasn't the day I won. It was the day I stopped losing. The day I took my silence back. If this story touched you, if you felt my struggle and my strength, then subscribe for more powerful first-person stories of resilience, justice, and the moments women like us rise again. Your support helps these stories reach others who need them.